the Baen Free Radio Hour.
Hello and welcome to the Baen Free Radio Hour. Today, Sean Hazlett interviews John Ringo and Casey Moores on Welcome to the Jungle. And later, we continue with the serialization of One Jump Ahead by Mark L. Van Name, Part 30.
All right, well, welcome to the Baen Free Radio Hour. I'm here with John Ringo and Casey Moores, and we're going to discuss Welcome to the Jungle. So let's just get started. John or Casey, both, tell us kind of just a little bit about, for folks who kind of just fell off the turnip truck and are not familiar with the series, this is the second book in a new series. And, if either of you can kind of just give us some background about the series and all that good stuff.
John, if it's your baby, if you want to take it away.
Muted. A few years ago, during my unfortunately very long writing hiatus, I had this character pop up and start talking to me. And he was actually a gangbanger in Chicago. And it was like, sometimes with these characters, it's almost like you're sitting down and listening to the guy. This guy had become a stand-up comic. And he's making jokes about his life, which was basically being a murderer from a very young age. And how he got into IT. And then he discovered he couldn't actually do IT because he was an Indian, and all this other stuff. Anyway, this character is just talking to me and he's telling me this story. And it's just really, I want you to understand, this is how I create, okay? I don't want to come off as like artsy fartsy or anything, but this is how I create. By the way, the background of this, totally fake. I write in a South American prison cell, but so the first image that I see of this guy is it's a rainy night. It's a street downtown. It's just pouring down rain. And there's this guy in a hoodie. And he walks into a crowded bar. It's all black people. And of course, it being a club, they're all real dressed up. And the bouncer doesn't even have anything with him. He doesn't ask for any money. The guy just walks right past. He obviously knows who he is and is not wanting to get involved. He walks into this place and he walks to the back, and there's this guy that's dressed as an obvious pimp with three other guys that are just kind of dressed to go out clubbing. And this guy in this soaking hoodie walks up, pulls out a 9mm and guns down all four of them. One of them manages to get off a shot and it wings him. And he goes up to the bar. He grabs a towel off the bar and kind of ties it around and sprays some ammonia down, and then throws $100 bill on the bar and walks out, and then just disappears into the rain. And I have at this point absolutely no idea why this has happened. I don't understand anything about this story except this guy's shooting. And then the next thing he's telling he's like a stand-up comedian on an open mic night. And he's just talking about his life. And so the story progresses and I see who he is, how he grew up, and all of this stuff about him. And he's wanting me to tell his story. And it was 2018, 2017, sometime around then. And I'm trying to explain to him that I can't tell this story because I'm a 60-year-old white guy. And everybody will just come down on me about it if I try to tell your story. And he's really pissed off at me.
That's cultural appropriation, John.
And I finally find out why what happened. And it's just a gut punch. Right? And after that night, he just walked away and became a completely different guy. So a little while later, this other character started talking to me, and he was basically a white version of the guy. Mm-hmm. Oh, I can write you. But he told me all of these stories from all of these different universes, all of these different lives that the same character led. And then finally, I kind of went and, especially in the first book, it's very obvious this is a mash. I took the elements of about 3 of the different stories he told me from 3 different universes, and I mashed them together. And that created Thomas Edwards, aka Not That Kind of Good Guy, aka Thomas Phillips, aka Boogie Night, aka Philip Crawford III, aka God, what the hell was the name of when he was playing that he was the goat herd in Vermont?
Oh,
you remember that? Adrian, was it Adrian Kornbluth or something like that?
Man, that was the most absurd of all of them. That's the one that doesn't stick with me.
Yeah,
referring to self-referential as G with the XE.
Yeah. So, and the character, for people who've read like a lot of other John Ringo books, the character is basically Oliver Chadwick Gardenier. If he grew up in the modern era in foster care in a ghetto, in a very violent ghetto, where he had access to the entire internet. So instead of him becoming, finally falling into academia late, even though he hates academia, Michael started absorbing all of this information at the fastest rate he possibly could. He's the kind of guy that listens to TikTok video or YouTube videos at like 5x, right?
Mm-hmm.
He does like books on tape from universities and stuff, and they're like they're beaming at him at like 3x, and he's listening to nuclear physics in one ear and sociology in the other ear. He absorbs information at an enormous rate, and then he processes it really fast. He's one of these people who really is just totally off the charts. He is what Alexander the Great would have been like.
Mm-hmm.
He is a totally, and everybody's like, this kid is such a super character. I go, yeah, he is a super character, but you have to understand what he's actually up against. If you can go ahead and keep it with the 3, that'd be great. Because I can use it for a little feedback. But that is the basis to this universe. It was originally this black guy who was really smart, but he wasn't at this level. And then these other universes were created, and I mashed them together. So the first book was Not That Kind of Good Guy, in which you meet the character and many of the characters that are around him that go on through the series. At the end of that book, the question, he kind of disappears. And you know why, but I'm not going to give away a spoiler for the end of the book. But in the second book, there is a novelette where he encounters some important people. And then the next, after that novella, which was about 45,000 words long, I think, then you get to Welcome to the Jungle, when he goes to New York as a superhero, and then he leaves New York for a period of time, and this is when he's come back, which is why it's Welcome to the Jungle, because he's walking into the jungle, but this time he's got help. Okay, Casey.
Sorry. Oh, sorry.
Before he was pretty much just a lone rider, right? He had Mama who really couldn't do much for him, and he was pretty much on his own. But this time when he goes back, he's got help. Casey.
Yeah. So now Left Out is a novella that hopefully we'll reattack sometime in the past, where he has gone to Montana. He's found a family. He spends the entire first novel, obviously, as this lone wolf, sort of getting along with the Junior Supers, sort of finding a little bit of a tribe there. We know he's got a little bit of a tribe with Gondola, but he doesn't know any of them really. He sort of has rumors of who all these people are that he's been working with. But for all he, all of them could be just about anybody outside of what he thinks he knows about them. So he doesn't really know any of the people with Gondola as much as he trusts them with his life and all those things. In that sense, he's had a tribe, but it's not been a very personal tribe. Now he has a family. Now he is getting to know the junior supers a little bit better, and they are becoming part of his tribe as well. His world is expanding, and it's kind of strange and unusual for him. And that's really the transitioning that we're seeing in Welcome to the Jungle, is that he is having to adapt how he sees the world, how he lives his daily lives and his daily life and runs his daily business, knowing that there are other lives on the line, other people that he cares about, that he's starting to really care about this world that he lives in, as much as it is kind of dumped on him his entire life, as much as it has treated him horribly. He's starting to find reasons to attach himself to the world as it is, or at least to pieces of the world that really matter to him. He's making friends. He's making some very close relationships. He has a father for the first time ever, and it kind of bounces back and forth narratively on whether or not he calls him Derek, or sometimes it's kind of like a mental slip and he thinks of him as father. We see that.
Now,
he
really
also,
quickly, what was the name of the novella so that people can check that out for the audience?
Where the Moon Meets the Water. And
Okay.
that currently is only available on my Substack. And Where the Moon Meets the Water has to come in one of the books. You're going to have to actually see certain things that are directly Where the Moon Meets the Water, because of one in a scene that's a closing scene in one of the upcoming books, where Derek actually talks about Annabelle. You know the scene that I'm talking about, because it's a real gut punch scene, and you don't really get the gut punch unless you've read Where the Moon Meets the Water.
Yeah. And there are a couple of those sorts of scenes where it's a little bit of realizations. Where the Moon Meets the Water is kind of low from an action perspective. It's mostly just him experiencing this new life in this family setting, but there's a few revelations that come out during that. And that was kind of one of the major tricks. That was kind of one of my major jobs helping with Welcome to the Jungle, was trying to incorporate that without laying it out flat. I had to sort of hint at these things and sort of catch the readers up on what happened in Montana without ruining the impact of those scenes, so we can bring those in later.
Yeah. Exactly how to bring Where the Moon Meets the Water in. It's possible at some point that I will finish Where the Moon Meets the Water, but I can't think of any climax Where the Moon Meets the Water. It's just, well, it's time to go back. And when I was actually writing it, I think in the Substack I left it in, because I was writing this stuff more or less just cranking this stuff out. And Casey could definitely catch that part, because it was not my usual editing job. And when I was actually writing, I don't know, is that still in the document, where it goes, oh, the heck with it, we need to go back to New York? I mean, I actually wrote that into the document, and then it just, you're all of a sudden in New York. And it goes from like they're on a camping trip to New York. It's just there's no transition at all.
The way that plays out, and the way the performance that was presented to me, was it just kind of ends, and that's where it is. It was like, oh heck, this, we need to go back to New York. Welcome to the Jungle.
Yeah, right. And that's because I ended up not being able to write those scenes very well, the scenes that I wanted to do, because one of the scenes that I wanted to do, I know we're supposed to be talking about Welcome to the Jungle. One of the scenes I wanted to do was actually him with the grandfather chipping flint and making flint arrows at 6 o'clock in the morning in the freezing cold, like Derek talked about. And Michael, because he's a super, it's not bothering him at all. Why is Dad always bitching about this stuff, Grandpa? This isn't bad at all. And speaking of which, since I'm an earther, oh look, I made a perfect arrow. That's not the way you do it, grandson. Yeah, but it works.
Stop cheating.
Stop cheating. One of the things we might do, and I know we're discussing, like, because I wrote a bunch of the stuff about his backstory. Because like Michael Edwards wiped out a whole drug gang at one point, all the shooters in the drug gang, when he was 11 years old. How does an 11-year-old do that? Well, a really Machiavellian 11-year-old with about this much help, who has carefully scouted the ground and knows exactly how to take them out, can do it. But he has to be somebody at the level of Michael Truesdale. Michael Edwards, Michael Fusco. So one of the things maybe to do is just like take all of those and throw them together into one book, because with all of the backstory stuff, so you actually get to know Mama a little bit better. You get to see how she backed him up. I think I actually did the scene where Annabelle, did I do the scene where Annabelle actually goes to the hospital? I think I did in the Substack, I did the scene where Annabelle actually goes to the hospital. But we could possibly take all of that stuff and throw it together and it would just be one book.
Yeah.
I mean, with the novelette or with the novella, I think it's long enough that we'd be able to get like over 100,000 words out, because the scene where he's setting up the gunfight with the Fifth Street Kings, that's like 10 of those Substack posts. So that's almost 50,000 words right there.
Yeah. I think that was going to be my recommendation somewhat after the main series, is to start bringing back and have a collection of those pieces. So I think that's where I was going to suggest where the Moon Meets the Water fits in. So we don't necessarily have to.
We not only have not just the Moon Meets the Water. Sure.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. We could take all those pieces and put them together into one sort of collection.
Yeah, that might actually have to come out before the storm. I mean, like we do see what I'm saying? Like those two, and then we do that, which is a compilation of like all of the stuff that's partial in some way to say, but it's enough information there to kind of build the whole thing, and then you go to the storm.
Yeah.
Storm books.
That's actually my homework right now from Bane after per Dragon Con discussions. It's kind of my next job is to lay out how we're going to play out the rest of all the things. So maybe you and I can talk offline about that at some point in the near future.
Hi, Cassie.
Yeah, there
was that Cassie I heard in the background?
That was actually Connor.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you've seen since he was a baby.
No, I haven't seen Connor. Have I ever seen Connor?
I was actually now wondering. Maybe not. Yeesh.
I might not have ever seen Connor. So back to Welcome to the Jungle, right? Mm-hmm. We just had a discussion about like how to publish all of the other stuff. So Welcome to the Jungle. So Michael Edwards grows up as an orphan in the slums of Baltimore, and in this very, constantly abused, beaten up, horrific stuff. Meanwhile, absorbing all this information because there's I don't know if it's in the published books, but it's like, where did you learn all that stuff? Well, I got an Obama phone when I was 4, and all the other kids, they was doing what all their older brothers and cousins was doing, which was watching porn. And I realized I learned to read when I was 2. And then I read every version of the Bible because the houses that I was in, they didn't have any books, except sometimes they'd have a Bible. So I've read every version of the Bible by the time I'm 4. And then I got an Obama phone, and it's the entire internet. It's all knowledge of man. So he was doing calculus by the time he was 7. He was taking college courses by the time he was 8. He was doing public paper. Well, he did his first public paper when he was 9, and it was a joke. It was called the 3 goat problem.
Yeah, and it was Adrian, by the way, the 9-year-old pansexual goat herd from Vermont.
Right. What was the name?
Adrian Kornbluth.
Adrian Kornbluth. Right. The 9-year-old, because he's taking this college course on the closest thing that he has to a mother is a transgender. There are people who are born not with gender dysmorphia, or at least develop it very, very early. And Mama's like, you ain't trans unless you was willing to take a beat down when you was 5 for playing with dolls and wearing women's dresses. You ain't trans. You're just making it up. And Mama's a 6'4" black dude who was very, very clear. He's a dude, but he's also a woman. In so he wanted to figure out, what they were doing and all this transgender stuff in college. So he took a course on transgender, even though he's doing like physics courses, high-end physics courses at the same time from Harvard. And he describes it as exactly what he expected to be, a whole bunch of woke bullshit. But he was kind of trying to pick up, something of value. There's nothing. At the same time, he's taking courses from the London School of Economics. And for your final paper for this course, you have to write a 5,000 word paper. And everybody's like, oh my God, a 5,000 word paper. He's writing one of those a week for the London School of Economics, right? so he writes this paper, and he literally comes up with a word generator. These books were written slightly prior to AI becoming a big thing. So he took a random word generator and filled it with every woke word, like just in alphabetical order, and then had it write sentences, right? And then he went through 5,000 words, and he went through and made absolutely certain that not a single sentence had any syntactical value at all, right? There were a couple of sentences that actually not syntactical value in reference to the other sentences, but they themselves had syntactical value, and that could not be, okay? And then he started with like a 250 word introduction about the three goats that he tends to, because he's a 9-year-old pansexual, a 9-year-old pansexual goat herd on a commune in Vermont. And the in Vermont is very, very important, right? Mm-hmm. So he, and about these three goats and why Fred is always a problem. And then he concludes it, and it's like the three goat problem. You've always got two goats that are fine, but Fred is always the problem. And it's talking about transgender allies, right? And the three goat problem was like, this is the most amazing thing ever. It's brilliant. It's beyond compare. To the point that it was the cover story in the Octagonal, which is the one time that I actually used a real name, which is the leading journal of transgender and non-binary and intersectionality, which is published entirely online. There is no physical copies of it, but he was the cover of that. And it spawned an entire new like division of intersectionality and critical theory, which is the three goats theory. And what is the meaning of the three goat problem? Well, the three goat problem means everything to everyone, which means absolutely nothing.
Nothing to anyone, right?
It means nothing to anyone.
Means what you want to do.
It's literally just non-syntactical sentences, one after another, put into paragraphs and with subheadings that mean nothing. And that was his first published paper. Now, his other two published papers were in astrophysics and international child trafficking. The economic model of international child trafficking. And that is because he belongs to this organization called Gondola. And Gondola does, at this point, a lot of things, but one of its main things that it does is it combats child trafficking. Mm-hmm. But he was put into this particular group. They're hackers that use mercenaries to do this. But he was put in this particular group at the London School of Economics because one of the guys was associated heavily with the child trafficking, the international child trafficking field. And so when they were going over, it's a 5-person paper, London School of Economics, master's level, well, what should we do this on? Let's do an economic, and Michael said, let's do an economic model of international child trafficking, because nobody's ever really modeled the flows. And if you model the flows, you have a better idea how to intercept it. He did that deliberately because then the guy who was actually involved with child trafficking, the guy who was involved with child trafficking, then founded a think tank to combat child trafficking so that he could get information from authorities about what they were doing to combat child trafficking. He was a double agent, if you will. But Gondola already knew that, so they're using the information that he's getting from the child traffickers to then combat child trafficking as well, right? So it was the whole Gondola does a lot of stuff like that. It's all these big setups. It's all these like internecine little Machiavellian plots, because Gondola is entirely people like Michael Truesdale. Maybe not as dangerous, maybe not, in some cases, almost as rich, and in some cases richer, or at least coming from very wealthy families. But they're people who are all super geniuses. And that's why they're so effective. Anyway. And you get to see a lot more of that in Welcome to the Jungle. That's one thing about Welcome to the Jungle, is that Gondola comes in a lot more. Is it in Welcome to the Jungle that he does the Mission Impossible thing?
Yes, he does the Mission Impossible theme, and they're backing him up. The one I was thinking about where you were saying that is actually the very simple one. Is like sometimes they have these very complex setups, but sometimes it's somebody like Michael looking into the deep fakes of one of their friends that then busts open a whole,
right?
Child pornography ring, essentially, and everybody that was looking for it and watching it. Yeah,
because Sasha ends up getting deep faked, and Mike gets all pissed off about it because he's very paladinish towards Sasha, even though she's an invulnerable flyer. He's like, I will rescue you.
Well, he found a way.
But then he goes and looks at what was going on, and then from that he's able to then start finding people who are actual pornographers from it, and where kids are actually being hurt as opposed to it being a deep fake. But Michael had grown up in this, he was alone. He didn't have any friends. The gangs were all black. They were all pushing him out. He was always the one getting beat up. And then he finds out, he's like, hey, I finally got me some white privilege, because it turns out he's a billionaire. So a lot of this is about fighting for his inheritance and all of the stuff that's going on around that. And there's another book that continues on in that vein, which will be the sequel to that, which is the name of the sequel.
Like I said, I'm still working out the lineup. That's my homework right now. We have Surviving the Game. We've got the Kraken. We've got, what else is on the line?
Surviving the Game, I think, is the one that.
I think so.
And is that one complete?
That's my next job. And actually, that's my next job is to dig through all of those and recommend what happens next. So that's my homework right now. That's where we're going.
Yeah. In the Substack, I had gotten up to the point that I wasn't too sure what to do next, so I did a whole bunch of the backstory. Not That Kind of Good Guy, in some ways, almost feels like a sequel, because the backstory is so thoroughly ideated on Michael Edwards that when I went to write the character, there were all these references that it has the feeling of a sequel. Like he's talking to Mama on the phone, and he's talking to Gondola and all this other stuff. And so there's a lot of explanation that has to go on, that if I went back and wrote the 5 books that would have been his childhood, you'd finally understand what all was going on. Like, he found Gondola because he was hacking into a server when he was 8 years old. And it turned out that it was one of their servers that they leave out there as bait to test hackers and see if they're any good. And then they go and they check who these people are and see if they're, if they're decent guys. They didn't care that he was 8. They only cared that he was brilliant. So Gondola also shifts very young, because they don't care how old you are. They just care how smart you are. And so he was given a test, which was this thing that ended up being a loop. And the only way to get out of it was you had to be able to figure out the way out. And the real test was not the hacking that you did in the test. It was being able to figure your way out of the test. Can you get out of the simulation, if you will? So he started working with Gondola Rings 8. And if, you had all of these back books, that there wouldn't have necessarily been that info dump at the beginning of it, where Gondola, right? But by this time, Gondola is just part of the world. Anyway, yes, welcome to the jungle. I'm remembering what was in that, so you really get to start to see who Michael Edwards / Truesdale really is in Welcome to the Jungle. You don't really grasp who this guy is and just how utterly ruthless he is. You do at the end of Not That Kind of Good Guy. Yeah, you really see Michael Edwards come out in Not That Kind of, right at the end of Not That Kind of Good Guy. You really see Michael Edwards. You could have cleaned the blood off of it. Yeah, he's definitely not that kind of good guy. You could have cleaned the blood off of it. I was in a hurry.
And Not That Kind of Good Guy, you're really seeing him adapt to this new world that he lives in, this sort of like strange new environment where he is not in the worst place on earth, that he has friends, that he has new powers, that he's trying to adapt. He's trying to figure out his situation and where he fits in. And Welcome to the Jungle, he's becoming very comfortable with it, and he's taking the lead. He's charging ahead. He is, like John said, he's doing what he needs to do to sort of get everything that he is, get his inheritance, overcome all the obstacles. But to him, they're not even obstacles for the most part. They're just puzzle pieces that he's just like, there's this problem, solution, move that over there. There's this problem, that solution over there. It's more like he's just dancing through the barrier set in front of him. And we get to see that pretty much enforced throughout the entire novel.
Because everybody seems to think that these are major issues, except Gondola, because Gondola is, everybody else is playing checkers and they're playing hopscotch. Right? They just, we're done. Hey, we've already figured out the problem. Okay, moving on. And you do see that, but it's just these, it's these things where everybody else would be like, oh my God, what do we do? We're going to have to do this. We're going to have to do that. And he's like, oh my God, just fucking kill him. I mean,
you referred to.
Go.
You referred to Alexander the Great, right? Which is a perfect example. Like, how did he solve the Gordian knot? Right?
You just cut it.
Just cut it.
Yeah,
right.
And Michael, he faces all of these Gordian knots, and he always finds a way to cut it. And he just doesn't, because he doesn't care about doing it the right way. He is very much a ghetto rat in that way. The rules just don't apply. So he's, the Batman, Superman, we've got to play by all these rules. Not Michael freaking Truesdale. Doesn't work that way. And one of the things about it is you find out in the first book, and it becomes much more the case in Welcome to the Jungle, there is a QAnon conspiracy in this universe, okay? Truly evil, wealthy, old white men run the world, okay? Or at least run the Western world and much of the world. And they are. I mean, they're like sacrificing children to Satan and all of that shit. His great-grandfather was the head of it in the United States. And he's like, my great-grandfather was a truly evil person, but I begin to understand him in many ways. So he's like, if you don't actually do the evil shit, but be just like that guy, win, right?
Yeah. That's the thing. He spent his entire life seeing all these other forces, all these, from the low-level gangs all the way through the high-level society, not following any semblance of civilized rules and winning and getting ahead because of it. So, like you said, that's the world that he lives in. That's the world.
If everything is corrupt, the thing to be is be a corrupt paladin.
Yeah.
Right. He's a paladin who does not give a. You're not. It's the. He's like a cross between Rorschach and whoever the super brain was. All right.
Ozymandias, yeah.
You're not
Yeah.
stuck in here with. I'm not stuck in here with you. You're stuck in here with me. Okay.
By the way,
I don't fear-
Rorschach is a great character.
I do not
awesome.
fear you. You need to fear me. Okay. Because I know everything about you. Okay. I know what you are. And I know how to destroy you.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't really get it because he's a 13, 14-year-old kid. How dangerous can he be? Oh, yeah. Very fucking dangerous. Yeah. Very fucking dangerous.
We see that build up throughout Welcome to the Jungle, that the forces are arrayed against him, the people, the specific figures that are specific antagonistic figures start off thinking, here's this kid, we'll just do what we always do. Whatever, will be over. Can I go to my golf game now? And later on, it's, what are we going to do now? I don't know. He handled that problem. How are we going to fix this? I don't know. Who else can we kill? Do we have any more assassins out there? Call everybody.
Yeah, it really is. It really is the John Wick scene where he goes, how many should I send? All of them.
All of them.
Right? Yeah. We got to throw everything at this kid. And it's the John Wick scene, right? He just fucking kills it all. He just ends everything.
Mm-hmm.
This couldn't happen.
I think there's also a similar scene in like Leon the Professional, like the same, like,
yeah,
who do we send? Everyone, right?
Yeah. And it doesn't work.
Yeah. Yep, it never does. It never does. So, if you could tell the audience a little bit about this Derek character, where did he come from, and some of the, he has a pretty interesting background.
So I was really unsure about including Derek in the universe, except that I really liked Derek. The reason that it would have been more challenging for him if he did not have his father. Would have been, it would have been a much more challenging situation. So Derek is loosely based on a guy that I knew. Derek is Native American. He's Sioux. And he essentially left home as soon as he could because he hated his dad. And joined the United States Army and then went to Ranger School, and it wasn't particularly hard. And then went to Special Forces School, and that wasn't particularly hard. So he did Delta Force Qual, and that wasn't particularly hard. Which gives you an idea of what his childhood was like.
Mm-hmm. John, you only have to walk like 40 plus miles through the hilliest terrain possible without knowing what the timing or the standards are. But, it's just another walk in the park.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, for the kid that was raised this way, it was. Like, Ranger School, it's like, oh, wow, we get lots of food.
Just give it to you. I don't have to get it. And I don't have to, what?
Why are you guys complaining about the cold? I'm from Montana. I've done this stuff with way worse clothes, So it really was. And he becomes the Delta's Delta. And one of the things about him is that he would literally go out by himself golfing outside the wire. And he did that because he's a golf fanatic. And also because it was a great way to find the Taliban, because they would try to kill him.
Mm-hmm.
No, I said try.
Yeah.
Huh?
Constantly on the sat phone, calling up, trying to developing new rules for the the golf world.
Are either of you familiar with that guy? They call him Shrek, where he would just go outside the wire routinely, just on random missions. Yeah, I think one time they tried to interrogate him. There was like a checkpoint, and he's just like, I didn't know any Pashtun or anything like that. Like, what did you do? He's just like, I can't say the word, but I acted, ends in tarded. And he was like, ah! And he's like, they just looked at me like I was crazy and just let me through.
But yeah, Derek would go outside the wire mostly because he would get bored. And it was all high speed stuff. He'd already done deployments regular infantry. So, one of the things that you see a lot of these podcasts, they got all these high-speed guys on them. And the high-speed guys are starting to like, hey, we could only do high-speed because we had all of these other guys that didn't do the high-speed stuff. And the way that the other guys lived was god-awful, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, Derek could be out on one of these cobs where the only thing they're getting is MREs and everything else. And he'd be like, and they have to make up their own weightlifting gear and everything. He'd be like, better than back home. And that's one of the problems with leaving Where the Moon Meets the Water out, is that you really don't get Derek's relationship with his dad at all.
Yeah. That was one of the major challenges, but I think the best thing that Derek brings to Welcome to the Jungle is that he very specifically is what's basing Michael through all of this. So Michael is not just a rogue loose cannon charging through New York, wreaking havoc, taking on the society head on. It's sort of like now he has this figure that he sort of checks with Dad to see what Dad thinks about his plans. He checks in with Dad to let him know that he's doing these things. His dad is sort of quietly hovering in the background with his very judgy eyes.
But on the other hand, he is ex-Delta, so it's like Mike's like tootling out of the condo. I'll do some gondola shit. Like, okay, if you get caught, don't talk till we get the lawyers there.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that was definitely Derek's role throughout the Welcome to the Jungle is the basing of Michael, is sort of grounding him in some semblance of reality and giving Michael some sort of backup, kind of, but support definitely more than anything else.
Yeah, and one of the things about Derek is it would take somebody like Derek to be able to manage Michael.
Exactly.
One of the problems with Michael is he is very, very unmanageable. He is, I can't describe it exactly as a loose cannon. He's just very, very, I am the smartest guy in the room, therefore I know the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And he is still 14. He is always the smartest person in the room, but he's still 14.
Yeah. Where Derek gives him some sort of balance. Yeah.
And Derek is smart enough that Michael recognizes him as being somewhat of a peer. And even though Michael doesn't exactly, like, he doesn't blow smoke up at Derek's butt, but he does recognize Derek's background as being something superlative. There's a great scene in Where the Moon Meets the Water where Derek is their first meeting with grandkids or with grandparents, and Michael's grandfather, Derek's father, who's a sub chief of the Lakota tribe, finding out that his grandson is Michael Edwards, who is a Kyle Rittenhouse, sort of beyond Kyle Rittenhouse in many ways, because Kyle Rittenhouse was, he's a huge white supremacist. He killed all these black men. He didn't kill any black guys. I can't remember the exact count on Michael Edwards, but I think it was 14 in one gun battle. What was it, 14?
I don't remember the number either. It was in that ballpark. Yeah.
Yeah. When he was 11 years old. And so this hits the news, and it's like they've got these 14 obvious thugs. The photos that they got of them are all mug shots, and then they got this school picture of the kid, and it's like, those guys killed the kid. The kid killed the 14 bad guy. The 14 thugs. Everybody's like, he's a huge white supremacist.
Yep.
Yeah. He was raised in the ghetto. He knows all of them by name, right? This was a personal beef.
So Grandpa learns about this, learns that this
was big news. But because when he became a super, his face changed. You have to read not that kind of good guy to
Reconstructed.
get all the stuff about the supers. But he had a lot of facial reconstruction when he was 8 because he got a huge beat down, smashed up his face. So he didn't look the way that he was going to look when he grew up. And when you become a super, it modifies you to look super handsome, super beautiful, very, very godlike look. And so he looks now like a younger version of his father with his mother's eyes, which was a completely different face than Michael Edwards. So when he meets his grandfather, it's like, one of the things you should know is that I'm actually Michael Edwards. And his grandfather, the sub-chief of the Lakota tribe, is like, holy shit, my grandson is Michael Edwards? Holy shit, right? Now,
I'm so proud.
Now that's a real Sioux warrior, right? Telling his son, the Delta Force Command Sergeant Major, that's a real Sioux warrior. And he's like, well, I'm pretty sure my dad's got a pretty high body count. He goes, oh, he did it all with JDAMs.
Doesn't count.
You got a whole army behind
old
him.
ways.
You were by yourself, right? You got to tell me everything that happened with that. Yeah, he actually got off on a castle defense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was partially even in Baltimore. They didn't want to try to put an 11-year-old or 12-year-old white kid up on the stand for 14 counts of first-degree murder or even second-degree murder, because even in Baltimore, but the other thing was because he'd taken over an old chemical plant. This is the back, a little bit more of the backstory for those who have read the books. What he'd done is he moved into this old chemical plant, and he had wired the whole thing for sound and video, and camped out there. He'd stolen a bunch of money off of the drug gang when he killed the 2 guys that kidnapped him. And so he's using all this money to buy stuff and basically living his best life as a homeless kid in this old chemical plant. And he had 2 guns. And at one point he's looking at him and he's like, Michael, you got a superpower. This is before he got superpowers. You've got a superpower. You ain't no good at making friends, but you're so good at making enemies. You got more people to kill nor you got some bullets. So he had the whole thing mapped out. He had medical stations. He had all sorts of stuff up inside of the pipes. When he was 11 years old, he could just slither up into them like a snake. So when these guys finally found him, they broke in, and he's like, I'm going to give you one chance to get your ass out of here and leave me alone. And if you don't, it's all on you from then on. So because he had taken over this, because he was a tenant in this property, which is like an EPA Superfund site, right? Because he's a tenant in this property, under a particular ruling, it counted as his domicile, and therefore it was castle doctrine. Which how he got off. Yeah. Because they were going to hang him. But it would have been really tough with an 11-year-old, up against all of these thugs. So anyway, that's the backstory to it. But so when he meets his grandparents and his grandfather finds out he's Michael Edwards, it's like, oh my God, my grandson is the greatest thing ever. My son, the ex-Delta, not so much. Which is, that's in the Moon Meets the Water. Yeah.
Yeah. I hint at some of that there, that relationship where, grandfather not so impressed by his, Delta's Delta son, but, loves Michael to death.
But he's nuts about all his grandkids, and he was just an absolute bear with his kids, which is a very, it's a thing. Anyway, welcome to the jungle. But in that one is when the main part of it is that Michael is attempting to reclaim his inheritance, which he got from his mother. And it's a lot about court battles.
The primary problem is that it's the primary source of funding for a lot of the society's efforts, is that trust. So they are going to defend it tooth and nail, and that's one of those things where it's one of those sort of cat and mouse games, chess games, or whatever. But they're doing very good at staying several moves ahead. It's like what I said about not that kind of good guy. We're not meeting the main characters that are constantly foiled at every turn and captured constantly and always and losing at every round. It's they're going to do this, so we're going to do that, and they're going to do this, so we're going to do that, and we have to wait until they try and kill our lawyer, and we'll be ready for that one too. And it's like, wait, they're going to try and kill me. It's like that's where we are right now. It was like, can I rethink this?
Oh, don't worry about it. You'll have good.
Yeah, we'll be fine. We got a guy. We got a few guys. In fact,
we know a guy.
So.
But yeah, everybody, the society is playing chess and he's playing hopscotch. It's they spot something, and one of the problems from the point of view of it not being dramatic enough is that Gondola really is a Deus Ex Machina. They really are, but he is advancing Gondola's goals by damaging the society. So stuff comes up, bad things happen, but they're playing hopscotch, and everybody else is playing chess. And it's like, nope, we're not even on the board. We are over here doing the things that you don't even realize are going on that will destroy you.
I'll say that's where the disclaimer that needs to be made is that it's not really this massive struggle against the society. That's there, but it's really about Michael's development to this, like I said, gaining tribe, gaining his place in the world, determining where he is and what he needs to do forward and what his priorities need to be, where everybody else is now fighting the society, fighting the pieces that they're arraying against them, whereas Michael is already mentally past that, really, and fighting the storm, whatever that's going to be when it happens.
Yeah.
He's already trying. He's already moved through all the permutations of what is currently in front of him, and he's planning for the future. He's trying to figure out how he defeats that thing that he doesn't even understand yet, that greater threat looming on the horizon that everybody else seems to be almost forgetting ignoring in the grand scale.
And that's something that comes up in Not That Kind of Good Guy, where he says, why aren't we preparing for the storm? Yeah. And the older supers are all, because when in this universe, supers occur in puberty. You develop a superpower in puberty, usually under some sort of trauma or stress. One of the things about that one of the effects of that is that most people don't go through just sudden out of the blue trauma. Mostly there's some sort of ongoing trauma that then when a person hits puberty, that ongoing trauma occurs, and then suddenly somebody gets superpowers. Well, one of the things that does is now you've got a whole bunch of supers who have traumatic backgrounds. Mm-hmm. And so one of the problems with the supers is that most of them are kind of nuts. Most of them are kind of nuts. Not just Michael is not a sane person. That's one of the things to point out. I mean, from the point of view of just regular society, Michael Truesdale is not a sane person. He has kind of gone to the other side of insanity and has reached like a transuranic position. It's one of the problems with giving him anything to try to make him sane. Like you give him Paxil, you give him any of that stuff, he just completely flips out.
Or you have him evaluated by a series of psychiatrists. That's the scene that we see in Welcome to the Jungle and how he deals with all those various psychiatrists. It's like either he becomes their psychiatrist, he enrages some across the board. He has some very ways of dealing with all of them that completely separates any attempt to render that to declare him insane in court.
They're one of the things is he's trying to get this, and is he psychologically stable enough to get this? Because it's $1 billion+. Is he psychologically stable enough to get this inheritance? Well, I'm not going to be managing. My dad is, and he's a former Delta and a member of the bar, so obviously he's stable enough. well, that doesn't matter. We've got to see if you're stable enough. So they send him to all of these. They end up sending him to 3 psychiatrists. And how he handles that is like
One of my favorite scenes.
it's a moment of levity, shall we say, especially with the first one, who's the fat trans chick. And instead of her psychoanalyzing him, he psychoanalyzes her and gets her to finally, release her anger and all the things that have happened to her. And
Let's unpack that for you.
huh?
Let's help you unpack this.
Yeah, let's help you unpack this, right?
The next one is charged with assault. Is like, Your Honor. Assaulting a minor, I mean.
Yeah, so he basically he flips one to his side by doing really good psychoanalysis and getting them to finally open up with their therapist about all of the things that were actually going on with them. By the way, I did not put it in any of the future books, but we might want to think about, if you can remember this, is it was Tammy? What was her name?
No, but go ahead.
Anyway, we need to have her appear in one of the later, actually him appear in one of the later books, having detransitioned and lost weight and become a gym bro. Right? Who has taken Jesus Christ as his personal savior and has become a gym bro and has lost weight. And, but
Now, throughout the
series,
go ahead.
He's got the personality of a cult leader. Michael Truesdale does. He has the personality of a cult leader. Yeah. And he tends to form cults around him, whether he tends to or not. But anyway, you were about to say something.
Yeah. Any key themes in this particular book that are worth highlighting, either emergent or intentional?
Well, one of them is the understanding that what you're dealing with is a person who is a cult leader. Because that becomes much more clear as Welcome to the Jungle goes on, as more and more people start to center around him. He is the...
Yeah, sorry. I wouldn't go ahead as him becoming a cult leader, but I would try and more gingerly phrase it, like I said, of him developing these relationships in a world where he really hasn't had any meaningful relationships outside of Mama and Gondola his entire life. It's his growth into becoming a part of the society that has beaten him down his entire life, and starting to form these attachments. That's really the connecting piece that this novel gives us for Michael. All of his aliases. Michael,
all of his aliases.
This one, yeah.
But that is, if you're watching this and you read it, note that he has that personality that people tend to glom onto him. People tend to attach to him, even much older people than he is. Now, his dad is not. His dad is definitely acting as his dad. Yeah. But there are times when his dad is actually like, yeah, okay, I'm just following this kid. Even Derek does a little bit. But it is him growing into that role and sort of preparing for bigger things. The other theme to it is the importance of teamwork, because he does a lot more with he's bringing more people in on doing certain things, and also sort of he is intentionally creating allies in Welcome to the Jungle, if for no other reason than having really good stories later. Welcome to the Jungle is when they take down the Norwegian Ranger guy. Yeah. That's kind of like in passing, right? Big time international,
they keep upping the stakes on the assassins, and
Yeah,
That's a step.
And it's like, yeah, we'll just take this guy down.
I say another theme along those lines is that exactly along those lines is that these insurmountable obstacles, these things that seem just impossible to overcome, aren't. The demons, the monsters, all those things aren't that scary when you just go about, you handle them the right way. We, like I said, we have this, one of the things you get with this series is a hyper competent main character.
And it's intentional that he's hyper competent.
Yeah.
Because what he's up against requires hyper competency.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing about the hyper competency is that with sufficient competency, everything is solvable.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, we can't solve any of this stuff. I don't want to get overtly political with this, but I'm going to get overtly political. Donald Trump, love him or hate him, is a competent person. He's an extraordinarily competent person. Okay, yes, his father was super rich and gave him $50 million to start. He turned that into multiple billions of dollars. He is a hyper competent person. When you take a hyper competent person and you give them the power to do things, fucking miracles happen, right? So it is an argument for. It is the exact opposite of, we'll take the everyman. Like Michael O'Neill in A Hymn Before Battle was the everyman.
Mm-hmm.
And he was put into a situation where he had competencies and he developed more competencies.
Yeah.
Michael Truesdale, Michael Edwards is a hyper competent person. And if you use hyper competent people and you give them the ability to do competent things, just let them fucking do it. You get miracles. SpaceX. Okay.
Mhm.
Elon Musk, most hyper competent people are very disliked because most people are not hyper competent. I am not a hyper competent person by any stretch of the imagination. Casey is like 1,000 times more competent than I am. Among other things, he was a long-term Air Force officer and a pilot.
That means
Okay. I'd probably never be able to land a plane. Okay. I am not a hyper competent person.
It's not that.
But when you take hyper competent people and you give them the ability to do things, amazing things happen. Now, the problem is when you have had in the past hyper competent people that have built systems designed for hyper competent people to maintain, and then competent people have decided that they are going to tear the systems down, it then requires hyper competent people to fix the system.
Mm-hmm.
If you were just, if you just kept the systems working properly, you wouldn't have to worry about it. Is it in this one that he's riding around flat killing people and then burying the bodies? Or is that in the next one? That's in Surviving the Game.
Okay.
But in Welcome to the Jungle, he is riding around on the subway just beating people up, right?
Oh yeah. Well, not the way that you phrased it. I'd say defend people that need defending, but yes.
No,
sometimes preventing.
He's just going around doing just random superhero shit. Okay.
Yes.
When I say he's just beating people up,
and that kind of expands to outside of his immediate radius or immediate, line of sight. It starts off with him, physically involving himself. By the end of the book, it's kind of evolved to the point where he's got this bubble around him, and if anybody's doing bad things in his bubble, he's handling it in his way.
Because he has something like X-ray vision. So if he sees bad things happening, he just takes action. Mm-hmm. And as that bubble expands and there's more bad things happening, in some cases where it's like, this person doesn't need to breathe anymore, he just fucking kills them.
That's the line for me.
Yeah. There's certain things that, no, I see you do certain things, let's just fucking kill you.
Yeah.
And bury the body.
Yeah.
Where nobody will find him.
he's kind of more the Punisher than Batman in that respect. Or
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, or Deadpool.
Yeah, if you think of I won't say it omnipotently powerful, because when the storm hits, you realize that no matter how powerful he is, it's not powerful enough.
And I think that's
But a super powerful his earth powers, he can move anything that is an earth material. And so bone is an earth material. It's essentially a living limestone is what bone is. And so he sees people as skeletal figures, kind of skeletons with ghostly outlines around them, when he uses earth power. And so he can see what people are doing, like X-ray vision. So he also develops metal powers and several others. So he can see things like a person's carrying a knife. Well, okay, so a person's carrying a knife. Oh, they're pulling the knife out. Okay, well, I'm not going to let them use that knife on that innocent person. Or some people are, there's a scene in Welcome to the Jungle, I think it is, where there's some guys who are harassing a female. And along with becoming a very handsome or beautiful person when you get superpowers and your particular superpower, everyone is more or less at Captain America level of physique. And he has just an extensive background on kicking people's ass. So he's going around in the subways with, the hoodie and the mask, and, he's just playing on his phone until some shit breaks out. And then he's like, time to kick some ass, right? Put in the mouthpiece and kick a whole bunch of ass. So these guys out of the subway and then fucking take off before the cops show up. But if he does get caught, hey, I'm Junior Supercore. It's my job.
Yeah. But it's also in some of those settings, and we played this up a little bit. This got played up, is that he also has to hold himself back. He can't show the full extent of his powers. Sometimes that's one of his challenges, is doing those things without, I could just lift all the gang members up into the air and smash them against the sides of the wall, or maybe smash them into each other or whatever, but I shouldn't do that because I don't want people to know that I can do that. So I'll just give them the regular beatdown.
I'll just give him a plain old beatdown. So, and he's actually like in his head going, I just thought beatdowns are fun. Right?
Now, any projects that you're both outside of Welcome to the Jungle in that series that John or Casey, that you're both working on, that you want to cover or talk about a little bit?
Casey?
I got a few short stories out there that I'm working on, and actually one just released today with the Expanding Universe by Craig Martell. That's a Blood and Armor story. I helped Bill Fawcett with his Blood and Armor series, and that's out there. And I'm still putting some short stories out there. I hope to get back to some novels someday in the future. And I'm also finally developing the Buff Orpington series with Jamie Ibsen. We created the concept in the background of one of our Four Horsemen novels, Unshackled. But now, separate from the Four Horsemen, we're developing the Buff Orpington series as a whole. It's starting off as a little bit of a sort of spy thriller, but it takes a drastic turn. And it's meant to be an homage to sort of cheesy action movies from the 80s, but a little bit of a mishmash, and it's going to be genre hopping. We'll see how that works, but it's been a lot of fun so far, and we've gotten some good feedback on the first novel that we'll put together as a series when it comes out.
Excellent. John?
Yeah, actually, cheesy action series. There are aspects of Welcome to the Jungle that remind me of the cheesier aspects of 1980s comic books.
Yes,
because he is just a guy who occasionally he is a billionaire in waiting who occasionally just goes out on the subways in New York Cities and kicks people's ass because they're just being ne'er-do-wells. And he actually uses the phrase. He actually uses the name ne'er-do-well.
Yeah.
I have been chastising ne'er-do-wells. Right, is kind of his approach. The big thing, other than the Welcome to the Jungle, is we have completed the 4th in the Trans-Dimensional Hunter series. That's the close of the series. I'm not absolutely certain when it's coming out, but I think it's already available for pre-order, and please do so. And if you have a local bookstore, if such still exists around, please feel free to pre-order there as well, because they might order some more. The other thing is that Gray Reinhardt is working on a Troy anthology, and I've been getting the updates about what sort of stories people are going to be writing, and that will include my also unfinished novel, right? My also unfinished novel, which is currently another novella, which is the Troy 4, which is the sequel to the Hot Gate. It's called Path of Souls, and it takes the opening of it is the last a part of the last chapter of Hot Gate. So it takes off right from Hot Gate and immediately goes into the rescue mission and everything else. And what the Rangora are doing, what the humans are doing, and eventually I'm going to complete that as a full novel. It's just that there are certain plot. It's not that there are plot holes right now. It's not really finished. It needs 2 more whole plot lines to be able to make a complete book. Is basically what the deal is. There needs to be 2 more plot lines in it for me to be able to make a complete book. And what is the sort of the climax in this novella would actually occur in the middle of the book. It would be like the end of Act 2, which is when Wolf 359 gets attacked by a completely new enemy. And for really, really weird military reasons. Did you read that one, Casey?
Not Gates or the
no,
I haven't read the
whole
that you put together. I've been told
so
about
Comet, who at the time is a Lieutenant JG. Comet, who at the time is Lieutenant JG, is the only line officer in the Wolf 359 system when it gets attacked. Now, there's an admiral in charge, but he's an engineering admiral.
like Rourke's Drift.
Huh?
Kind of like Rourke's Drift. Yeah.
Right. So the senior officer is not a line officer, and in a combat situation, the senior line officer automatically takes over. So there's Lieutenant JG who is telling the admiral as politely as she can, "No, Admiral, I disagree with your battle plan. I've got it." While she's in a swimming pool, in a bathing suit, and proceeds to kick the ass of this new enemy in a swimming pool in the bathing suit. And there's some very comedic aspects to it. It's the Oga, or the new enemy, and the Oga are not used to fighting like very, very serious, we are just going to kick your fucking ass wars like they've been fighting with Rangora, like fighting with Rangora. And they're used to these very sort of stylized, sort of battles where they try to minimize cost loss, because they're a mercantile species, and so they come into the Wolf 359 system through a newly opened gate, and they're up against Comet. And one of the funny things about it is that before the Ogat can surrender, they have to actually the Ogat name, which in the books you see this very, very long Ogat name, is actually it's not a name so much as it's a recitation of their entire history, their personal history, right? And their full names are even longer because there's recitation of their ancestral histories. And so for the Ogut to formally surrender, not only does he have to do his entire name, but he also has to give his entire ancestral history. And so Comet has to have a full name to be able to accept the surrender, and her ancestral history to accept the surrender from the Ogut. So that is like, descendant of Ragnar the Terrible who ravaged the Irish coast on the female side. But, descendant of Genghis Khan, the greatest conqueror ever, because only like 5% of Eurasians are descended from Genghis Khan.
But,
Yeah,
close enough.
That's not too shabby. Any final words for the audience, guys?
Buy the book.
It's
Because
awesome.
it is.
You're gonna love
It's
it.
a fun book. It's a really fun book. It really is.
It's a major
It's
step
just-
in Michael's progression. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just Michael just looking at all of this evil shit and kicking its ass.
Mhm.
And just doing it with a smile because he loves killing evil. He loves fighting evil. And I think that's something that certainly all Bane readers will certainly get into it.
Yeah.
If you like the feel of Bane books, that whole zeitgeist that is Bane, you are going to love Welcome to the Jungle. Because it really is. It's Bane. Jim Bane once told me, I said, about Ghost, I said, Jim, this isn't Bane brand. And he said, Bane brand is what Jim like and Jim like, right? Jim would like this book because he would like the 13-year-old just fucking up all of these really, truly shitty, evil people and having fun doing it. And so will you.
And by the way, you can get it now. It releases officially on October 7th. So pre-order as early and often as you possibly can.
Absolutely.
So thank you both.
Okay. Good talk.
All right. Thank you, Sean.
And now, as promised, one jump ahead. John Moore is a nanotech-enhanced soldier of fortune. Lobo is an AI, a living weapons and intelligence platform of enormous destructive potential. Two very dangerous wolves in a galaxy of deadly corporate and paramilitary predators. But Moore has grown weary of the killing, and just once he'd like to finish a job without leaving a trail of blood behind him. Not going to happen. Not on a pristine planet called Mackin, where two gigantic corporations vie for control of the local jump gate and access to the riches of an undeveloped world. Dealing with a kidnapping and extortion scheme is only the beginning for Moore and Lobo as they work to stay one jump ahead.
Of course you don't. Now you step into the teaser, yes sir, right here. Just a few meters and you'll catch your first glimpse of the treats that await you within. You'll see a new cast every show, all 8 shows, fresh skin each and every time. I shook 'em off, turned left, and walked quickly toward a small hotel I spotted at the end of the street. I was drawn to it by the guards at its door and by the fact that a few men in SAW off-duty coveralls were coming out. If SAW troops were willing to use it, even by the hour, its security had to be at least passable and probably better. If I was going to sleep anywhere outside Lobo while on Lankin, I wanted it to be a secure place where Osterlad didn't own part of the staff. The presence of the SAW troops vouched for this one. An old woman, the color and texture of sun-baked driftwood, eased out of a tunnel near me and ambled my way. I picked up speed. When she realized she couldn't keep up, she yelled at me with a voice stronger than her obviously decaying body suggested should be possible. "How about a little lip love, fella?" I kept moving, knowing any change in my stride, or worse, eye contact, would only encourage her. She was determined. She ran until she was clearly in my field of vision, moving faster than I would have guessed she could, took out her teeth, held them aloft, and said, "How about now?" I had no idea how to reply. I hadn't been in a place like Queen's Bar for over a year, so it was a jarring change from the time alone in Lobo and in the beach resort of Glenn's Garden. I didn't want to see what the woman might do next, but I got lucky. She fell back as I turned to cross the street to the hotel. I didn't understand her caution, because the streetwalkers in Queen's Bar, like all the other business owners, typically act without fear. As I drew closer to the hotel, however, both her behavior and the presence of the SAW troops made sense. It was a sleep safe, the only sign of its name a small plaque over the door that provided all the information any of its target audience needed. I knew this chain, had used it on other planets from time to time. Minimalist but comfortable rooms were more than adequate for its customers, who came for the security for which it was justly famous. With no weapons allowed, no surveillance on the inside, a full complement of exterior sensors whose audio and video feeds were piped into a wall of monitors in each room, and escape chutes leading from panels beside each bed to underground portholes that would pop open only in emergencies, sleep-safe hotels were the lodging of choice for the paranoid and the hunted. The door scanned me on the way in. Then the isolation chamber outside reception scanned me again, this time in more detail. When I passed both checks, a payment drawer opened in the wall. I thumbed some currency from my wallet into the sleep-safe coffers. The business was strictly pay in advance, of course. I paid the premium for a corner room with both roof access and a rear-facing escape chute. Before I allowed myself to relax, I checked the monitors and was pleased to see no signs of anyone following me. I hadn't expected to find any pursuers, but most of the ways I've made my living since my escape from Agro have involved risk, so counter-surveillance measures were my norm when I was working, and I was almost always working. If I'd been smart enough to employ them when I was vacationing as well, I reminded myself, I might not have been in this mess in the first place. The kind of information I wanted was most likely to emerge at night, when Queen's Bar hit its stride and mental lubricants flowed molten and bubbling through its streets and its residents. So I stretched out on the bed and hoped sleep would follow. Squatting at the intersection of Dean's Folly and Laura's Lament, in almost exactly the geographical center of Queen's Bar, the busted heart bristled with activity in the fading light of the early evening. Pieced together from a jumble of semi-domes of mold-melted native rock, the busted heart typified the hard hustler chic in vogue among the well-heeled and the heavily armed. Restaurant, bar, and brothel. It was strong enough to bear direct hits from a broad range of individual weapons without requiring management to burn credit on repairs. From the scorched strips adorning parts of the exterior and the occasional pockmarks dotting the walls around the entrance, customers and their enemies had put the building to the test, and it had passed. Though I'd intentionally arrived early, business was already brisk. Customers exiting the place laughed and shouted with intoxicated glee. The smells of basic bar food drifted outside each time someone opened the door. I was lucky enough to land a corner table in the rear of the main room. I ordered a Milano drink and a stew and bread dinner, tipped the waitress enough to wipe away the sneer my beverage order earned, and settled in to watch and listen. What I could hear of the human chatter was of no help. A few SAW soldiers on leave, all young enough not to know better than to risk being in a place like this, sipped drinks at the bar and were as guarded in their conversations as I hoped they would be. I'd hate to think my old company had grown too lax. All I could pick up was how much they hated corporate militia and weapons inspections, a standard complaint of merc troops everywhere, and one I'd voiced myself. Armed conglomerates existed on most planets after they became legal as part of the resolution of the corporate government wars of over a century ago. But no military group, merc, or even any of the few remaining government forces liked inspecting them. Fighting them was fine, certainly preferable to taking on other merc groups, but inspections annoyed all involved and served no real purpose. Any organization large enough to legally establish a militia was competent enough to hide weapons. No news there. Elsewhere around the large room, hands exchanged fixed credit chips. Wallets chirped the happy jingle of money in motion, and pills and wires surfed waves of human hands. But nobody mentioned Osterlad within my hearing. Human sources were a bust. The machines proved to be a bit more useful, but only a bit. The gaming tables maintained non-stop critiques of their players. Unimaginative devices, coupled with gaming-level processing power, they were the idiot savant conversational geniuses of the consumer machine world, able to talk brilliantly about their games, completely full of themselves, but unable to focus for more than a sentence or two on anything else. Game boxes were useful, but difficult sources. They all communicated constantly because they had to do so to maintain the up-to-date city and planet-wide records that serious gamers expected to be able to access for score comparisons.
This has been the Bane Free Radio Hour. Thanks for joining us at the heart of science fiction. Join us next week as we bring you Haley H.Y. Gregor's interview of Catherine Asaro on her latest Bane novel, Gold Dust. And later, we continue with part 31 of One Jump Ahead by Mark L. Van Name. Score by Ruth Judkowitz.